So the story I'm about to tell you might be very sad for most of you, for some of you, but it's just a story that I also found really sad when I read it, and I was like, wow, this is quite interesting. And I'm like praying and hoping that God reveals to us the mysteries of his word. So it's about this Levite who sets foot and goes to Bethlehem to get a concubine. While she's getting this concubine, the parents are basically like, oh well, the mom is like, oh, do you want to stay for lunch, delaying him from leaving early. And then he's like, oh, okay, cool, I'll stay for lunch. And then later on that day, like the father is like, oh, after eating the lunch, he's like, oh, isn't it too late now? Like, don't you guys can sleep over and start your journey tomorrow. And I'm guessing it was attachment issues as well. They're trying to be like, oh, are we actually letting our child go? But then he goes like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. So this is in Judges 19 for anyone interested. So that's verse 10 where he's like, I can't actually do that, I can't do this. And so he goes. So as they journey through the night, it gets dark, so they're now like close to Jebus, right? And the girl's like, why don't we just like sleep here overnight? And the master, the Levite, goes like, well, we can't do that because these are strangers, like we need to go where it's family. So they travel until they're like in Gibeah and Ramah, and they're like, okay, we can stay here. Why? Because it was the land of like the tribe of Benjamin basically. So they don't find actually a place to sleep because there was no one who was ready to lodge them, right? And so they sat down in the street of the city. Imagine, because there was no man that took them into their house to lodge. This is in verse 15. So this is where he was like, we can't stay with strangers because they're not the children of Israel. Let's actually go to our people. And when they get to the land of their people, nobody is ready to take them in, which is verse 15. Sounds familiar. Sounds like Christ saying a prophet is not without honor except with his own people. But anyways, this story doesn't even end here, guys. So they're sitting outside. There's nobody that's ready to take them in. They're sitting outside the streets of the city. Then this old man approaches them and is like, oh my goodness, like, how are you guys? Where are you from and everything? And he goes like, it's not gonna happen that you guys sleep outside when I'm still alive. So he begs to take them in. And the Levite and the concubine, he's like, yeah, sure, let's take us in. And then as soon as they go in, apparently some of the Benjamin men had seen this young man and they had already planned evil things against them. So what happened is these guys come at night and they're knocking at the old man's door, and they're like, did you take the man who's traveling with the concubine and everything, bring him out so that we can use him for our satisfaction? I was just like, hold up, like what are you even saying? And so was the old man. He was like, guys, like, what are you saying? And I was even shocked at his next action, because he goes like, guys, I have a virgin daughter and this concubine, like you might as well take these two and do to them what you like, but you can't take the man. Like, why would you even consider taking the man? And those guys were insisting like, nah, we want the man, da 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 da. But then what they end up doing instead is like, the guy was like, no, you can't take the man. So what he's done is he releases the concubine instead. So he gives those men of Israel the concubine to like do whatever they wanted to do with the concubine. And so apparently like they were so evil that they like abused her all night, to the point that the next morning like she was just lying there at the door, right? And so the Levite gets ready, opens the door, finds her lying there, and he also goes like, you know what, get up, let's go, right? And I was thinking, where's the affection? But actually, I guess it was his way of processing hurt. But then he goes like, yeah, get up, let's continue our journey, Let me actually look for the verse, sorry. So in verse 26, this is where she came dawning of the day and fell down at the door of the men's house where her lord was till it was night. And her lord rose up in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go his way. And behold, the woman his concubine was fallen down at the door of the house, and her hands were upon the threshold. And he said unto her, up and, oh God, this version is even sorry guys, this is not funny, because I was listening to it and I was thinking, why? He said, up and let us be going. But no one answered. Then the men took her up upon an ass, and the man rose up and got himself onto his place. Right? So this is KJV. That's why that was like, up and let's go, like as if like, bro, just do it. But then he got upset. So he gets home. So initially I was like, okay, that's lacking empathy or anything. But then when she didn't respond, clearly she was dead, for someone who hasn't picked up. And then he goes home. he cuts her into 12 pieces, right? Am I right in that? Yes, verse 29. He cuts her into 12 pieces and sends her pieces to all the tribes of Israel, right? And he's like, this is how I've been treated. This is how my concubine was treated, like in my own, in a neighbor's house in the Benjamin world, right? And I thought that was so sweet. That was so like accountability kind of focus, because in my head I thought he just gave up or something. But the fact that like already, like, look at how gruesome it is that he cut her into pieces. But you can imagine the anger that he had, like after all that journey going to get the child, he still didn't keep the concubine. And I really think the parents probably didn't want to put the child as well, because what was with all the delay, that's probably why it didn't work out. But also like just focusing on the reality of the matter, that he then sends all these pieces to all the tribes of Israel, saying, this is how I was treated when I wanted to take a break in like the Benjaminite territory. This is what the men did. And so what all the Israelites agreed upon was like, let's actually ask the Benjamin people to apologize. So they confronted the Benjaminites and said, guys, please, like, this is so wrong, like you guys should apologize. And then the Benjaminites were like, nah, we're not apologizing. In fact, they were preparing for battle. Guys, imagine the audacity. They thought they were right. They were like, yeah, we did nothing wrong. In fact, they were trying to defend themselves for their actions. And so I just thought it was honorable as well that all the Israelites were like, how could this happen? And to the point that they were willing to defend that man and, you know, everything. Like they were standing for truth and for justice. And so now at this point is where the story gets interesting, because they then pray to God and they're like, Lord, like, should we attack, you know, Benjamin, because this is so sad? Like the tribe of Judah is like, it's so sad that we have to fight our brother. Like, so they're trying to ask God, like, is it okay to attack, because look at what they've done. And God says, yeah, go ahead. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, when they go ahead, they lose. Hey, I said, how can the wicked be prevailing? So when they go for battle the first time, they lose, and they go back to God and they're like, God, is this worth it? Like, should we do this again? They go again and they lose. So look at this, guys, right? So in verse 20 it says, the men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin, and the men of Israel put themselves in array to fight against them at Gibeah. And the children of Benjamin came forth out of Gibeah and destroyed down to the ground of the Israelites that day 20 and 2,000 men. Like, tell me this, these people deserve to actually lose, the Benjamin people, but actually they're winning and they're destroying the Israelites, right? And at this point you're thinking, where is God? Like, God said, oh yeah, go ahead. And it says they come back, right? Because listen, guys, these Israelites did not act out of impulse. They were asking God. In verse 18 it tells you that God even gave them the right to say, actually, the tribe of Benjamin shall go first. You know, like, imagine against the Israelites. And then 22,000 men are down by the Benjamin people. And then the children of Israel go back to God and they're like, the children of God in verse 23, and the children of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until even, and asked counsel of the Lord, saying, shall I go up again to battle against the children of Benjamin my brother? And the Lord said, go up against him. Guys, you would think at this point, I had the voice of the Lord, so it should work, right? Listen to what happens in verse 25. And Benjamin went forth out of Gibeah the second day and destroyed down to the ground of the children of Israel again 18,000 men. All these drew the sword, right? So at this point, tell me, would you still go back to God? Would you still go back and be like, God, like, because it's like, where am I going if it's not working? But listen to what the children of Israel do instead. Then all the children of Israel and all the people went up and came unto the house of God and wept and sat there before the Lord and fasted that day until even, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And the children of Israel inquired of the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of the God was there in those days. All right. And they asked again. This was Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, who stood before it in those days, saying, shall I yet again go out to battle against the children of Benjamin my brother, or shall I cease? Think about it. This time they even gave God option B, because they're thinking, God, like, you can't keep doing this to me. So they give God option B. They're like, or shall I cease? Listen. And the Lord said, go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand. So listen to this, guys. I just realized that in our faith journey there is so many times where we cannot justify why God is not responding, right? Where we feel like God is not responding, or like I've been in a quest of actually saying, God, I actually think that I I am confused. Like I was like, God, I think my faith understanding is limited, because why would I hope on something and it doesn't happen, right? Which is exactly what these guys were going through, where they were like, God, like, shall I go? And then God says yes, and then they don't win. God says yes, and then they don't win. And it's like, what is the point? Like, and think of this, guys, like, even after telling you the story, I'm sure you all think, yeah, the tribe of Benjamin deserved to lose this fight. Why are they still winning? Now let's go and see the victory, right? So if you read the whole of verse 20, really, you get the storyline, right? So when the men of Israel turned again, the men of Benjamin were amazed, for they saw that evil was come upon them. This is verse 41. So, right? So this is by encouragement, right? Like, I feel like this is basically a faith series. So far so good, it's been faith stories. But yeah, think about it, right? So sometimes we think because something didn't happen, it means we didn't have faith, or it means God is not real. But like, look at these Israelites, like, you know, God is teaching them like a proper dependency on them, on him. And I think there's so much emphasis on faith being obedience, because when you look at the story going back, you see that they kept going back despite like God's yes contradicting the result. They kept asking God still. Like, in all of this, I saw that they showed God that they depended on him, right? And I think when you read a story like this, you start to realize that you're not crazy for believing the things you believe in. It is possible that sometimes you will want something and you think you heard God, and you really did hear God, because he wanted you to trust him in that area. And sometimes you don't get the result, but sometimes you will never get the result. Why? Because you walked away after your first attempt. But if you were like the children of Israel, who went back again and they bent offerings and they did even more, and they're like, God, like, you know, they prayed more, they did more, they fasted, they did everything that you inquired of God. Why? Because they were still like, this is bad, but also we need God to overcome on our behalf. I see surrender in this story. So the third time they go, in verse 35, it says, the Lord smote Benjamin before Israel, and the children of Israel destroyed of the Benjaminites that day 25,100 men, all these drew the sword. And it says they didn't even know. That's the problem. These children of Israel, these Benjaminites, didn't know for a while that they were defeated. They thought, oh, we probably won like the last time, which is what I read the other time, like here in verse 39. When the men of Israel retired in the battle, Benjamin began to smite and kill some of the men of Israel, about 30 persons. For they said, surely they are smitten down before us as in the first battle. But when the flame began to arise up out of the city with a pillar of smoke, the Benjaminites looked behind them, and behold, the flame of the city ascended up to heaven. And when the men of Israel turned again, the men of Benjamin were amazed, for they saw that the evil was upon them. Like, they knew that they had lost, because actually the Israelites had said that they would like light up a flame if they won. So after this, the Israelites then make a vow that all of them will not marry their kids to the Benjaminites, you know. And it was a whole long story as well, going further from that like they really cut ties, and they're like, nah, because what type of behavior is this? But they're also wailing, still saying, God, like, is this gonna be a thing that like we're actually no longer gonna be 12 tribes because these guys have chosen to go rogue? But I think my emphasis here is about our faith journey. I just want to encourage somebody who feels like, God, did I hear you correctly, right? And sometimes when God says do this, like I'm looking at these verses now and I'm realizing God said, yes, go and pursue. Like, he never said, go and pursue, you shall win, until it was the third time. That's when he said, I will deliver them into your hands, you know. So there is a difference between just stepping out in obedience. When God says, go talk to that person and tell them that this, it's different to go talk to that person because I will make that person converted into being a child of God. You know, there's steps that we take in obedience, but there's no guarantee of the result. But you still have to do it because it is God's command. And look at the pain that it was creating. But I see even further consecration in the Israelites, because they knew who God was and they were sticking to him till the very end. That's what I call having God as your only option. It means you trust him so much that even if the outcome is not what you wanted, you're stuck going back and back and back to him. So I hope that encouraged you to grow your faith. Unfortunately for that man and that concubine who suffered for such a crazy thing, but I hope this encouraged you to hold on to that faith, that sometimes you see wicked people prospering. They did prosper for a while, but when they lost for sure. Like, how many people died on that day? 25,000. And even if Benjamin was winning some of them, it's the fact that was the last and final battle that they had. So when it counts, God will show you mercy and victory. And like, their victory meant the most, you know, because they're not attacked afterwards, once they killed, it says, I think they did more than that, because it says they enclosed the Benjaminites around and chased them and trod them down with ease over against Gibeah towards sunrise, and there fell of Benjamin 18,000 men. Oh, these were men of valor. Like, think about that. Like, this is in verse 44. So they conquered more than just the 25,100. They did more. They went into their cities. Like, I like how that verse says they knew evil had fell upon them. Like, the Benjaminites knew when they saw the flame going up into heaven that evil had fell upon them, because it's just a reflection that it was over. Like, they knew at that point that it's over for us. Like, oh no. And so I just hope that this encourages you to hold on to your faith and to trust God's commands, stand up for justice, and to stay in obedience, but to seek God diligently and not give up just because the outcome was not what you initially intended. Hope you guys enjoyed this long, short session. See you again next time. But for now, bye.